The mission of the International Labour Organization, ILO, is to promote social justice and internationally recognized human and labor rights, based on the founding principle that social justice is essential to universal and lasting peace. The International Labour Organization, ILO, is devoted to promoting social justice and internationally recognized human and labor rights, pursuing its founding mission that labor peace is essential to prosperity. Today, the ILO helps advance the creation of decent work and the economic and working conditions that give working people and business people a stake in lasting peace, prosperity, and progress. The ILO was created in 1919, as part of the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I, to reflect the belief that universal and lasting peace can be accomplished only if it's based on social justice. In 1946, the ILO became a specialized agency of the United Nations. Its unique tripartite structure gives an equal voice to workers, employers, and governments, providing a unique platform for promoting decent work for all women and men. The ILO has 4 strategic objectives. Promote and realize standards and fundamental principles and rights at work. Create greater opportunities for women and men to decent employment and income. Enhance the coverage and effectiveness of social protection for all, and strengthen tripartism and social dialogue. In support of its goals, the ILO offers expertise and knowledge about the world of work, acquired over more than 90 years of responding to the needs of people everywhere for decent work, livelihoods, and dignity. It serves its tripartite constituents and society as a whole in a variety of ways, including formulation of international policies and programs to promote basic human rights, improve working and living conditions, and enhance employment opportunities. Creation of international labor standards backed by a unique system to supervise their application. An extensive program of international technical cooperation formulated and implemented in an active partnership with constituents, to help countries put these policies into practice in an effective manner. Training, education, and research activities to help advance all of these efforts. Established in 1919 as part of the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I, it is the only tripartite United Nations agency, bringing together governments, employers, and workers' representatives from its 187 member states. The International Labour Office, the ILO's secretariat, employs some 2,700 people from 150 countries at its headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, and in around 40 countries around the world. Its activities are directed by the Director General and the ILO's governing body, which includes representatives from member states, workers, and employers groups. Decent Work Agenda. As part of its mission, the ILO aims to achieve decent work for all by promoting social dialogue, social protection, and employment creation, as well as respect for international labor standards. The ILO provides technical support to more than 100 countries to help achieve these aims, with the support of development partners. International labor standards. The ILO sets international labor standards with conventions, which are ratified by member states, or recommendations, which are non-binding. Conventions are drawn up with input from governments, workers, and employers groups at the ILO. Conventions are adopted by the International Labour Conference, which meets every year in Geneva. In ratifying an ILO convention, a member state accepts it as a legally binding instrument. Many countries use the conventions as a tool to bring national laws in line with international standards. ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. Adopted in 1998 and amended in 2022, the Declaration commits member states to respect and promote 8 fundamental principles and rights in 5 categories, whether or not they have ratified the relevant conventions. They are: freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining, Conventions 87 and 98. The elimination of forced or compulsory labor, number 29 and number 105. The abolition of child labor, Conventions number 138 and number 182. The elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation, Conventions number 100 and number 111. A safe and healthy working environment, Conventions number 155 and number 187. Trade unions at the ILO. Worker group representation is drawn from national trade union confederations, so trade unions play a crucial role in developing policy at the ILO. The Bureau for Workers' Activities, ACTRAV, at the Secretariat is dedicated to strengthening independent and democratic trade unions so they can better defend workers' rights and interests. The Workers' Guide developed by ACTRAV provides an overview of the principles on freedom of association established by the ILO supervisory bodies, and helps to understand how ILO procedures can be best used to secure and promote freedom of association. The ILO supervisory role. The ILO monitors the implementation of ILO conventions ratified by member states. This is done through the ILO Committee of Experts on the Application of Conventions and Recommendations monitors compliance with international labor standards. Complaints can be filed against member states for not complying with ILO conventions they have ratified. Only complaints against governments can be submitted, to be heard during the International Labour Conference every summer. It is also done through the International Labour Conference's Tripartite Committee on the Application of Conventions and Recommendations. Member states are also required to send reports on the progress of the implementation of the conventions they have ratified. Complaints. Complaints can be filed against member states for not complying with ILO conventions they have ratified. Complaints can be from another member state which has signed the same convention, a delegate to the International Labour Conference or the ILO's own governing body. Trade unions use the complaint procedure and the International Labour Conference to bring attention to labor and workers' rights violations in member states. In the framework of the ILO Tripartite Declaration of Principles on Multinational Enterprises and Social Policy, MNE Declaration, the ILO has set up a procedure to support dialogues involving multinational enterprises and the representatives of the workers on the application of the principles of the MNE Declaration, Company Union Dialogue. The ILO, headquartered at Geneva, Switzerland, is a specialized agency of the United Nations, UN. It was established in 1919, as part of the Treaty of Versailles. It is responsible for setting labor standards, develop policies, and devise programs promoting decent work for all women and men. It is the only tripartite UN agency which brings together governments, employers, and workers of 187 member states. The ILO has 4 strategic objectives. Promote and realize standards and fundamental principles and rights at work. Create greater opportunities for women and men to decent employment and income. Enhance the coverage and effectiveness of social protection for all, and strengthen tripartism and social dialogue. It is also a member of the United Nations Development Group, UNDP, a coalition of UN organizations aimed at helping meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Members, the ILO has 187 member states, 186 countries plus the Cook Islands. World Employment and Social Outlook. Global Wage Report. The Forced Labor Convention, 1930. The Abolition of Forced Labor Convention, 1957. The Freedom of Association and Protection of the Right to Organize Convention, 1948. The Right to Organize and Collective Bargaining Convention, 1949. The Equal Remuneration Convention, 1951. The Discrimination, Employment and Occupation, Convention, 1958. The Minimum Age Convention, 1973, and the Worst Forms of Child Labor Convention, 1999. In June 2021, India completed its term as chair of the governing body of the ILO. Governing body is the apex executive body of the ILO which decides policies, programs, budget, and elects the Director General. India had assumed the chairmanship after a gap of 35 years. It held the position for the period October 2020–June 2021. India has not ratified the 2 conventions, out of 8. These are Freedom of Association and Protection of the Right to Organize Convention, 1948 and Right to Organize and Collective Bargaining Convention, 1949, Number 98. Reasons for India not ratifying these two conventions. The statutory rules in India, for the government employees, prohibits certain rights such as right to strike, to openly criticize government policies etc. After ratification, India would be forced to grant these rights to the civil servants. Hence, India has not ratified these two conventions. The 17th APRM of ILO concluded with Singapore Declaration, which was adopted in Singapore by the participating delegates. Key highlights of the Singapore Declaration. It sets 10-point priorities of national action for the member countries to deal with the issue of dwindling wages of workers, inflation, and unemployment. The declaration said social dialogue is key to building trust, and resilient labor market institutions are essential to sustained recovery, inclusive and sustainable growth, and need to be strengthened in the regions. The statement urges members to ensure labor protection for all through the promotion of freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. It calls for action to close gender gaps, to consider the ratification and effective implementation of related international labor standards, accelerate the transition from the informal to formal economy, and strengthen governance frameworks to protect the rights of migrant workers. It also calls for a just transition that helps build environmentally sustainable economies and societies in the face of climate change. Revitalizing productivity growth and skills development is also stressed in order to provide more and better jobs with particular focus on digital transformation, digital divides and lifelong learning. The statement highlights the need to reinforce the foundations for social and employment protection and resilience. This includes expanding social protection to all workers, strengthening labor inspection systems, enhancing occupational safety and health, OSH, addressing the rising costs of living with policies for adequate, fair, non-discriminatory wages, eliminating all forms of forced and child labor. The declaration furthermore confirms the commitment of governments and social partners across the regions to engage in consultations towards the development of a global social justice coalition. The Constitution of the ILO was drafted in early 1919 by the Labor Commission, chaired by Samuel Gompers, head of the American Federation of Labor, AFL, in the United States. The three organs of the ILO include the General Assembly of the ILO, the Executive Council of ILO, and a permanent secretariat. Thank you for watching this video.